Good afternoon or evening, everyone, and welcome to the Big West Mafia Show, part of the College Football Mafia Network. I am your host, Sergeant Pickles, and my lovely co-host, Becky Go Huskies, is having some delays. We all know how that goes with a busy schedule, but thankfully, I get to introduce our very special guest, Mr. Moen. How you doing today, sir?
Doing well, doing well. It's a Monday. Time for Big West Mafia.
Yeah, chat doesn't want to know what I had to offer you to rope you into this, but I appreciate you being here as always.
No
And
problem.
we're just going to get stuck right into the fun part because Moen is on a limited schedule being here with us on a Monday. But quick shout out to our chat. Joaquin Morales first in. Scary Stories NYC, another member, Chad Bracy. Got Antoine Codes. Got his fancy, or I should say, membership, not subscription. I always keep messing that one up, but I'll get it right one of these days. Daniel Gygax, Bob Shonsky. Howdy, everyone. How are we doing today? We're just going to get stuck right into it. So, why I brought you here today, my good friend Moen, is I had this brainstorm because I'm kind of a nerd like this. I like thinking about alternate versions of things that happen. You know, what if you turn left instead of right, et cetera, et cetera. And I have this whole series in mind for what we're going to do is what if certain events in college football history pivoted, and I'm going to kind of project it forward to see what they look like today. And how we thought we would kick that off to start with as we add our fabulous co-host Becky. How you doing, Becky?
Hi.
So we're getting stuck right into it because Moen's with us for a limited time, but we're going right into our what if scenario. And the brainstorm Becky and I had last week was, what if every single BCS and college football playoff championship game had the opposite result? What would it look like? What would the totals be? What would the conferences be? Who would be the powerhouses? Who would have nothing? And it turned out some of it was pretty predictable, and some of it turned out very differently than we would expect. So I thought we could get stuck right into that if I managed to work StreamYard correctly. But diving right through it, and everyone's going to tell me things like, oh, TCU was never beating Georgia. They got destroyed. That's not the point. That's not the premise. The whole entire deal, the whole entire deal with it is that you're getting the opposite results. And part of this, you could say, was me perhaps with my anti-Alabama bias, you know, in the Kalen DeBoer era, because it affects them the most as a bit of a spoiler. But starting out, oh, shoot. There we are. So starting out, kicking off right with it. This is what really happened. This is everything as it actually transpired from the BCS era. You see, and start with Tennessee in 1998. This Oklahoma is 2000. My Excel spreadsheet data got kind of goofed up. But you see all the usual suspects, Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Clemson, and on down. And a little interesting thing for me is you see it with the consolidation of wins. The SEC gobbled up 2 more championships. The Big Ten gobbled up 1 more from USC, but now the Big 12 and Pac-12 have none. Any initial reactions just to seeing things as they are? This is not news to anyone, but just anything stand out you may not have known otherwise.
No, it's all the usual suspects. You're right, are there. I mean, looking down this list: Bama, LSU, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, Florida State, Michigan. You know, the perennial blue bloods are still at the top.
Yep, it's all pretty much what we thought it would be. Just
yep.
You know.
Yeah, this is all no news to us. This is all as it happened. But over time, you may have forgotten a team here and there, picked up a championship, or even played for one. My standard apologies to our chat. My twins are in the background, and my wife is doing her absolute darndest to satisfy them as we roll along here. But here we go to the fun part. Now, this is what if. What if every single result was flipped? Where would we be in the universe? And this is where we would be. Immediately when I saw this, what stood out to me was per conference, the SEC, the Big 12, Oklahoma was on the verge of being a dynastic type team. And really, you know, you got 3 teams with 3 wins apiece. They would be viewed as the standouts in college football. But you start looking down the list and you're like, oh, there's Oregon. Oh, Notre Dame. Oh, okay. and you see Georgia's only got one. UW has one, and Virginia Tech, of all people, picked up a win along the way. So it seems to be far more spread out than what really occurred. Moen, what's your initial thought seeing that? I pitched this to you before, and I told you may have conflicted opinions based on this change.
Well, I like the fact that Michigan hasn't won a title here, but I hate the fact that Notre Dame has won a title here.
Yep. That's for sure what I knew you would be conflicted about. So what reality do you live in? Do you live in one where Michigan doesn't have a title, but Notre Dame does? You get an extra Ohio State national championship, though, and very recently. Or do you live in the world you really live in? 2 Ohio State championships and a Michigan championship, but Notre Dame is out there flapping in the breeze.
I think I would have to let Michigan win their title, and I have a rationale on why. Because if Ohio State wins in 06 and 07, they're not firing Jim Tressel and getting Urban Meyer.
That could be true. There are a lot of knock-on effects to things with consider. That's why I stuck my focus purely on just the games that were played, because that's where this What If series is going to be so fun for us. I could absolutely do a video spinning off what if in this reality Ohio State wins those games. Who do I think the coaches are hired, fired? Who stays where they are? Does Urban Meyer stay right where he's at Utah? Does Utah become a power going into the Pac-12? And then you have Kyle Whittingham is never hired. So it can get really fun getting into the what if aspect of it. And I thought that this was just a fun place to start. Becky, I think you and I are going to have similar thoughts about which reality we choose to live in with our good friends, the Duckies, sitting up there in 2 championships.
Yeah, see, I want to live in the reality that we have now, where just like Manti Te'o's girlfriend, it's fake. That national title for Notre Dame is fake, and those Oregon national titles are fake. So
yep.
I'm going to live in that universe. But, man, how awesome would it have been for Virginia?
The UW championship. We'd be the defending national champions.
I'd probably still be drunk.
Yeah.
But, again, how awesome would that be? Michael Vick, national champion, over of all teams, that Florida State squad, which was loaded. We could go back in time and look at that 99 Florida State team. They were ridiculous. So,
yeah, and I'll bring that one up too. I did a little bit of there's a bonus here on the far side, but this over here, you have the real life total, you have in green there the what if total, and then you have the difference by conference. And you can see the SEC dominance is very clear in real life, because if you flip the result of every game, they lose 9 of their championships. The Big 12 gains 4 of them. The Pac-12 gains 3 of them. The, at the time, Big East. And I went off on the top one based on what conference they were in when they played the game. And then right below that is what conference they'd be in based on where we're going in the future. But the SEC dominance is pretty clear. They have won more of the matchups than any other conference in terms of a winning percentage. It's been pretty clear. And Moen, what do you think about that? Do you think there's some magic the SEC has just pulled or gotten good at the right times? Obviously, having 2 games with 2 SEC teams certainly helps the percentage.
Right. And it's the SEC has the most fertile recruiting ground in the country. They've got Florida, Georgia, Texas, they're all throughout the Southeast. That's where all the speed is. Get all that speed in there. That's what's going to kill you. That's how Urban Meyer was able to win at Ohio State, by bringing in SEC speed, going down into Florida, into Georgia, into Texas, into those deep South areas, and pulling up that talent that has the speed. So it's not shocking to me. The SEC has lower enrollment standards. Kids want to play in the South. They want to play where they're close to home. So not a shocker.
Yeah, our friend Shonsky, for being a Big 12 fan, is really just all about SEC, man. I don't know. If you're a fan of an SEC team in addition to BYU, go for it. But, they've definitely had their run of dominance. But as this chart illustrates, they were not that far away from being just another conference. They won key games at key times. They really needed to. But you're not going to get away with locking out the championship game with 2 SEC teams. They can earn their way in on the field and have 2 SEC, but you're not getting the free ride to the dance anymore. So
let's not also forget that the SEC kind of cracked the BCS code back in the day. They figured out how to do it.
Indeed.
When they went to 8 conference games and then they said, look, we're not scheduling anybody. We're not doing the road game on like the Pacific Coast. We're not going to do a road game in the Big Ten country. We'll do a neutral site, let it get played. And then, oh yeah, we're going to load up and do, the FCS opponent right before the end of the year. We're going to add in, as many cupcakes from our region as we can on the schedule and just pad it. And then, like I said, as we've known over the years, Alabama doesn't play Georgia every year. They don't play, they play LSU every year because they're in the same division, but they don't play like when Georgia's been great and Florida's been great, Bama hasn't had to play them.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that was certainly a curious one to me. If you look at the what if we could live in a world where Florida has no championships, Tennessee never won theirs, and Michigan never won theirs, but we have all these other teams like UW, Virginia Tech, and TCU being champions since '98. It's pretty wild to see just how different it could have been. The one that stands out to me the most is Oklahoma, because you go from 1 championship to 3, and they're right up there with the bluest of blue buds. So a little bonus on the far right, this is just me and my nerds, is championships from 1974 to present. The reason it's 1974, that's the very first year that both the coaches and AP poll started awarding them after the bowls. Everyone knows I have a bone to pick with the 1960 Minnesota Golden Gophers championship because the Huskies beat them fair and square in the Rose Bowl, but Minnesota was awarded the championship before bowl season. And you see a lot of the same teams, a lot of dominance. But Oklahoma, if you flip the script and they win all their other games, they have 6 national championships since 1974, tied with Alabama. That's how close, a game here and there really turns the narrative on who's good, who's not good, and who is dominant over time.
Yeah. And like, if we're going to say, TCU, they got blown out by Georgia, it doesn't change it. I don't think anybody remembers what happened to Oklahoma against USC.
Yep.
04. Like that title's vacated, I believe, too. So, most people don't remember that was like 55-20. It was like
it was a very, very lopsided score, that's for sure. Yeah. But even I educated myself a little bit because I had no idea that Pitt had a champ. I know we got a lot of West Virginia fans in chat, but Pitt has won a championship within the last 50 years. That's not ancient history. I knew about Colorado, knew about Georgia Tech. They were teams in the 90s. But yeah, Pitt coming out of nowhere with a championship is pretty crazy.
It's the Dan Marino effect.
Oh yeah.
That wasn't Dan Marino.
That wasn't Marino. Was that after?
No, I think it was when they had Tony Dorsey on their team. Was when they won their title.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
It was before Dan Marino.
Like right before he got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, our friend Tony, of course, curious, Tony, the Golden Gopher fan, sees no issue with his 1960 championship. I imagine not, Tony. You and Greg hang your hats on that one. And Antoine Coates, if ASU goes undefeated in 86 and 94, they have 2 national titles, 1 loss in each of those seasons. It is the smallest of margins. That's why, for me, it is so fun to try and go through these exercises where Arizona State goes undefeated and they win a national championship, and you try and just work it through your brain. What happens.
Yeah, the 1996 game was a heartbreaker for him. That was the Ohio State versus ASU Rose Bowl. Joe Germain to David Boston. 7 seconds left.
Yeah, that was the old, was it Jake Plummer?
Yep, that was Jake Plummer's team, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Man, that was a fun team to watch. They were good.
Absolutely.
They were really good that year. I think Pat Tillman was on that team too.
That was just our little kind of preview, getting a flavor out there of what we intend to do, guys. And Moen, I don't know. Is there anything that you would love to see? I know that you'd love to see every reality where Notre Dame and Michigan have no titles, but barring that, what's something that you've always been picking at your brain that you thought maybe could have gone different?
I've already explained this on the other shows before, but I love this scenario of what if conference realignment. What if Notre Dame joins the Big Ten in 1993?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does the Big 12 stay put together? Nebraska doesn't have anywhere to go. Do they stay put? Does the SEC stay do we have a Power 6 now with the Big East Conference that's still alive. You know, that's what kind of power Notre Dame's, I think anyway, has kind of exerted on the college football as a whole just by being that lone independent and not joining the Big Ten, which is their natural home.
That's just like,
yeah, for sure.
It just blows
Absolutely.
my mind thinking that Rice would be a Power 6 team because the Southwest Conference would have stayed together. It just
yeah.
Rice.
If this, I still think you would see the Southwest go the way of the dinosaur, and the Big 12 would take over. Even if Notre Dame joined the Big Ten, I think that was going to happen. The Big 8 and the Southwest were going to combine. I even think you might even have the ACC still raid the Big East, but I don't think the Big Ten takes Nebraska. Nebraska
Penn State would be debatable.
12. Well, they would take Penn State with Notre Dame to get to 12, to get that
Makes
title
sense.
game. The SEC would still pick up Arkansas and South Carolina. They needed to get to 12. But I think you see the original Big 12 stick together. I don't think Nebraska, Missouri, TAMU, or Colorado leave. I think the Pac-12, maybe Pac-10, maybe goes to 12, maybe adds Utah and BYU. Who knows? It's just one of those scenarios where if Notre Dame would join, what could have happened?
Yeah, our friend Tony mentioning, what if the Big East had survived? That one, it seemed that had so many different problems, and people pointed to that when the Pac-12 died as like, oh, major conferences have gone away before. That was for such a different reason, because you had this major split of teams with different priorities, and there were some of them that had no interest in playing football and a lot of ones that did, and it just wasn't enough to survive when a conference like the ACC comes calling. So I'd be curious. I'd love to go through the exercise for myself of trying to make the football aspects, maybe they break into the Big East football conference and have them survive.
I think it would be great if you did like a Back to the Future timeline where Notre Dame joins the Big Ten and then that splits the timeline and this is the new timeline and so forth.
Yeah.
But
I'm
gonna jump off here, guys, and let you go do your thing.
All right.
Have a great show, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, Mo, and take it easy. Appreciate you being here.
See ya.
Bye. Man, these what ifs they're coming in. They're coming in strong.
Our friend Lad said, what if the
Come on, people, give us more. Give us some really good ones. We want
chat. I'm throwing this out there too. I can't promise I'll run them through the brain blender and see what we come up with, but I love to be able to just, every show, or maybe I put a standalone video out for these and just go through the mental math of what I think would happen. What world would we live in if some of these things had gone differently?
Yeah.
Becky, do you have one off the top of mind? Mine, beyond the Pac-12 surviving or the Pac-12 taking the Big 12 teams, or et cetera. But even back in the day, the huge one, yeah. Our friends call me Sean. What if Texas, Oklahoma, A&M, and Oklahoma State would have joined the Pac during Larry Scott days? That was
Texas Tech, by the way. That was Texas Tech.
Was it Tech?
Yeah,
okay.
A&M had already pretty much pledged to the SEC. That was
right.
Tech.
And they were. I know at first A&M was interested, but then they decided to skedaddle.
They didn't want anything to do with Texas. Yeah. Is what it was.
So we could live in the world where it's Oklahoma State, Tech, Texas, and Oklahoma. That was not far from everything of my understanding. That was not.
It was a done deal.
Far away from happening.
No, it was done. It was done. The only issue was USC was like, hold up, what's up with this Longhorn Network thing? What is that? And they're like, oh yeah, we're going to show our sports on that. And they're like, no, you're not. And as we have seen over the years, it has been the bane of existence in the Big 12.
Yeah, for sure.
It was a constant talk, and it's still a constant talk. It's part of the reason why people think Texas is so arrogant. Part of the reason why Nebraska and Colorado were like, oh, we want nothing to do with this. That was part of the reason, that Longhorn Network. It's just this is ridiculous.
Hello to our friend Greg. How we doing there? Some more people should roll in from chat. Yeah, if you're just now joining us, we went through our very first rendition of What If with the reaction from Moen, and it was what if every BCS and college football playoff championship game had the opposite result. It's a little interesting. I know maybe some people don't love diving into the weeds on that kind of stuff. I love it. I'm obsessed with it. But if you have an idea for what if something went differently in the history of college football, throw it into chat because it's something we really, really like to do. Yeah, friend Daniel Gygax, in the mid-'80s, Penn State was told no by the Big East. Imagine a world where Penn State's in the Big East and they're actually surviving and thriving, and the Big Ten had to look elsewhere.
No, let's just talk about Penn State in the Big East with Miami. Miami, I think, was independent at that time too.
I believe so. Yeah, and if it was the mid-'80s, yeah, I think Florida State or Virginia
Florida
Tech,
State was too.
Schools would have been either Big East or independent.
Yeah, Florida State was an independent at that time too. But think about how crazy that would have been with Penn State. That Penn State squad with that Miami squad, Catholics and convicts would have been like nothing compared to that thing.
Yeah, one of our members, Scott Schrader, who, based on his profile picture, appears to be a Husker fan in Texas. Nebraska would have left the Big 12 if Texas weren't such bleep holes, horns down. You know, that there's a lot to be said about that, and other fan bases have expressed the same. I think Notre Dame saw the ability to be viewed on par with their peers, and you could argue they traded Texas for Ohio State and Michigan. But I think just from my interaction from Ohio State and Michigan fans, they talk a lot of smack. But like as far as how they view the other institutions as schools, it's a lot more peer on peer. You know, we'll smash you on the field, but you know, you're our buddies when it comes to everything else.
Yeah, it's the whole thing with Texas is it's their administrators are jerks. So I totally get it. Like Texas has this like superiority complex over everybody, but it's like, okay. Well,
there's I
think Nebraska has more national titles in history than Texas does. So it's like, I don't know where you guys
are. Very Stanford-like in that way. Yeah. They shoot for national titles in all sports. But I know there's a lot to be said that the Board of Regents or Board of Governors, whatever they're called for Texas, the only group of universities that are managed in such a way where it's a whole collection of schools is the Cal system, the University of California system. They manage like a dozen top level research and academic universities. Texas manages a lot of the same. They have UTSA. They have other UTEP are all, I think, still included in the Texas umbrella. They manage a lot of stuff. So I think that's part of where that superiority complex comes from is the flagship school has to be the biggest and best. And it's Texas. They love football. They'll put it above everything else.
Yeah.
For Daniel Gygax here, Penn State was going to form a Mid-Atlantic Conference. I always assumed that's what the Big East was destined to become. Is, you know, you get the teams like Maryland. I don't know if you could ever poach the Carolina schools because the Carolina schools are the ACC. They are the core of the ACC. We've seen it with the drama with UNC and NC State and even Duke to a lesser extent. Like North Carolina is the home of the ACC, much the same as for years Texas was the home of the Big 12 and the Southwest Conference. Like it is core territory. The Midwest is like Chicago is the epicenter of Big Ten football because it's surrounded by all these other programs. And I think that whole Big Eastern Seaboard, because it shuffled so much over the years, and you get weird things like Maryland and Rutgers join in the Big Ten in a different world. I don't think that happens. I really don't.
Yeah, I don't see Maryland was in the ACC, Rutgers was in the Big East, but the Big East is still the only conference to kick a school out of the conference in like modern times.
Yeah.
Actually,
who was that? Remind me.
Temple.
Was it? Okay.
It was Temple. Yeah, Temple was in the Big East for like a couple of years, for like 10 years. They were so bad that they were just like, get lost.
Yeah, Tony shares a similar thought pattern to me as far as this goes. Pac was never going to add BYU, and a huge mistake. It didn't make sense when you had Colorado and Utah, but I think in the past 2 years, facing the demise that they did and losing out, I think the presidents and their fuddy-duddiness about it really got the better of them. I understand there's some institutional disagreements when it comes to BYU and some of their campus and student policies. Like, it is what it is. I'm not saying I agree or disagree.
No, I'm not saying
the presidents were not a fan of it.
USC had the same problem, by the way, 100 years ago. Just so you're aware. So USC, a lot of people don't realize USC was kind of in the same boat, religious school. That's how it was founded.
And USC and Stanford over the years, although they are private religious universities,
not
the
always.
religious aspect of it is very, very
but they all
unimportant.
they both had to break away from it, completely severing ties. So
right.
I don't mean to be that person. It was just never going to happen.
Yeah.
That tie. And I've said this to people before. Notre Dame, if they suddenly said, "Oh, we want to join the pack," it would have been an actual conversation that like might have gotten a couple of no's. Like, truthfully, they might have gotten in, but it would have gotten some no's. Like, a couple of schools that would have put their foot down and said no. So,
it's different times we live in today for sure. And like, for example, I don't think TCU being excluded from the Pac-12, you know, when it was being considered, I don't think that was on the basis of them being a religious school, because they operate much differently than other schools.
They're like kind of affiliated, but not affiliated. SMU was only coming on as like an idea because SMU had broken away from the Methodist Church. So like it was a large, complicated thing with BYU and the Pac-12. But in reality, I think the Pac-12 decided we still get the Utah market just by adding the Utes and not having to deal with the other aspects. Unfortunately, that would have come up on college campuses, which I will say there were some things politically around that time that, you know, the Mormon church had been involved with that would have caused a lot of problems. So
friends call me Sean here. You actually hit the nail on the head. So I've deeply been looking into, because South Carolina for years and years was part of the ACC, and you saw that initial wave of SEC expansion. How boring would it be if FSU joined instead of South Carolina? I think that would have made a lot more sense, but the University of Florida fought tooth and nail to keep other Florida schools out. That's been well documented.
Very documented. I'm still shocked that South Carolina ended up being the choice. And it's only because I think they were independent themselves. But yeah. That, by the way, I think he meant 5th Pac school, by the way. Oh, you're muted.
We'll get to you in a second, Tony. I just, But yeah, FSU to the SEC, it's still possible for it to happen. I don't know if maybe there's some backroom dealing and they finally just hook hard right. It makes so much sense for them to actually go into the SEC, but I think there's so much bad blood. And the Big Ten is literally open arms offering like, hey, FSU, we want you. You'll be our equal, our friend. We'll treat you right. I know it's far travel, but we'll take care of you. It's, you know, it's a tough call, but I think they've made it clear they have hard feelings about the SEC.
Yeah. I mean, as far as the 5th Pac school to join the Big Ten, I truthfully, and Bomber doesn't want to hear this, but it would have been Utah, only because, like, just on like a football thing, I think they would be fine. As far as other sports go, they would easily adapt, and I think that they could actually do really well.
The real answer is obvious, but it was Stanford. It was always going to be.
It was always going to be Stanford. But I'm not buying the Stanford hype. Like, I get it. They're a great academic school. They have great Olympic sports. But like, have you ever met a Stanford fan? Like, truthfully, like they come on. They come out of there making $180K a year, and they're already like, we're better than you.
Yeah. You and I both know, though, that the Big Ten presidents, the cringe word, academics, cringe. The Big Ten endowment is like more money than God. It's like some ridiculous number of billions of dollars per year. It's ridiculous. That I understand football. Stanford has been good at football at times. Jim Harbaugh, they were going to Rose Bowls. Like, they're not a crap football team with, they're not devoid of good football history.
No,
so it's not like you're just adding a total dud on the field, but Stanford is the ad because they literally pump billions of dollars of like contracts and research straight into the Big Ten Academic Alliance. And I believe they were offered at a certain point and turned it down, and that UCLA was actually the other pick. I think they were going to go with you. They wanted Stanford and USC together to cap off California for them, because they didn't really need UCLA.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think UCLA just got to go along because they're in LA. But I've said that from the beginning. Like, anybody else was in that market, Wazoo could have been in that market, they would get in. So.
Alrighty, chat. Well, we have a absolutely surprise appearance by our good friend Nathan Bomber Brown. How are we doing, sir?
Hey, I would like to be known as the owner, operator, and sole source of all your happiness. That's the
proprietor of this fine establishment.
That's right. I don't want everybody to know how good a job I did putting you guys together and everybody else. How you guys doing tonight?
Good.
Excellent. I love that you're doing this yourself. Are you guys excited that you guys are doing this on your own?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. One of these days we'll take the training wheels off, but for now, I think we're doing all right.
I think you're doing a great job. But let's see. Yeah, I mean, you've got 100 people watching. It's a Monday night. It's really exciting. So I'm just coming on to say that Doug Rohan reached out to me this evening, and we're going to do a special edition after you guys' show at 9:30 Eastern. And it's going to be all legal review. It's going to be ACC, Florida State, and all those new legal filings. He's going to run through from top to bottom with us.
Oh, nice.
And we're going to have a special guest. Let's see, Rock and Rant is going to be with us as well. So I invite you guys, obviously, if you want to come and hang out, that's totally cool.
But at 9:30 Eastern?
9:30 Eastern, yep. Right after this,
okay.
I'm going to...
I need to make sure I know when the shepherd's hook is going to come off screen and yoink.
Well, I'm not going to shut you down. You have to shut yourselves down. But I will be turning mine on at that point. I'll send out a separate link so everybody sees it. But I was just going to do with a promo and go from there. I'm still working on the link and stuff like that, but it's all good.
Yeah, no, I'll join you tonight. I'm very curious on. I see all that legal stuff, and I'm like, I don't know what any of this means. My basic understanding is what I've seen on Law and Order. So.
Well, we've been covering it for a year and a half, right? I mean, I don't know if you guys remember, but when I started listening to Greg, I want to say it was maybe October of 20. No, sorry, it was in the summer of 22, and we started really paying attention to some of the stuff that he was going. And I heard you guys join this show, and I'm listening. And I'm thinking, okay, Pac-12, they're sort of walking into a corner. They don't know it, and all this stuff. Well, the whole time that was going on in my conversations on Twitter, and then once I started the shows, it was all about the ACC's next. And the biggest thing that people need to understand is the ACC was always going to be last, because the Big 12 was first. The Pac-12 had the next contract. So the ACC is the one that was really the ball waiting to fall. And we could design how that was going to look, because when USC left, who cares about UCLA? When USC left, you knew that was the anchor university in the Pac-12. So the ACC is in real trouble. And if these other schools aren't paying attention, these legal filings that come out, if Florida State and Clemson or Florida State and Miami move, that conference is dead unless Notre Dame decides to join it.
Yeah, it's certainly news. And that's why we were trying to work it out if Doug was going to come on a little earlier and actually make an appearance on Big West. But I'm glad he got with you and you can do a standalone show. So please, everyone in our chat, if 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific, immediately following our show, head on to be right on the College Football Mafia main channel, and they will have special guest Doug Rohan, and I believe others, perhaps myself and Becky, can stick around for a moment or two. But he is the wizard of the legalese, and we'll break it down for you because we have had additional filings today pertaining to Florida State, and we here on Big West let the master analyst extraordinaire on the College Football Mafia main take those kinds of things. So absolutely 9:30 Eastern. Stick around for a special edition show.
Real quick, let's get a what if from Bomber himself.
Sure.
Oh goodness.
All right. So
go ahead.
So as you know, Utah went undefeated one year. Like, was that
08,
whatever.
They also went undefeated in 04, but okay. Yeah. So 08, go ahead.
So let's say those 2 years, right?
Right.
Would you trade? What if they got a national title and BYU lost their national title? Say they had lost that game against was it Michigan in the Holiday Bowl?
Yeah, right.
Like,
why would their why not just give them both national championships and see which one's more important?
Yeah, we can give them both, but
I
would say this. Just like Utah's used the last decade to build up their program, right? And the previous decade, so it's been basically 20 years since Urban Meyer took over. He basically modeled the growth that program was going to be on based on the model that Lavelle Edwards did for 30 years. They started winning in the 70s. They didn't win a national championship in the 70s. They won a national championship in 1984. So there was a 12-year lead-in to get to that opportunity to play. So I think Utah's done exactly what it wanted to do when it joined the Pac-12. It built itself up to be a very good power, and they decided, okay, we're going to compete at this level. I would just say, though, there is a sacrifice. There's not many schools that can do football and basketball, and Utah's basketball is just fallen apart. They were in the national championship game in 98, was it? Or 99?
Yeah, it was like 90. Yeah, it was 98 or 99. That was the year, like,
right.
What's his name was the number 2 pick after Tim Duncan.
Yeah, the tall dude.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is it's a trade-off. There's not many programs that can put money into both. So if you're doing a what if, I would say, is the Utah fan base happy that their basketball program is going to be an NIT power for years to come because they started to give resources to the football team? For BYU, they compete in 20 sports nationally, 30. They're like Stanford in the competition level. They win the Directors Cup. They win it every 5 or 6 years. So there's not many programs, I'm talking about all of sports in college at a university, that can make those claims. There's not many. There's only few. So to me, I wouldn't trade the national championship for anything, right? Because once it's there, it's never going away. And that's it. That's how I look at it. I think Utah needs to make a decision now that they're in a more organized and less selfish conference than the Pac-12. They can start making those decisions and say, what do we need to do to really grow? Because in the Big 12, Utah, all they have to do is put the money into basketball, and we all know how powerful basketball is. So,
all righty. Well, my what if that I was trying to work one in for BYU over the years, and I really thought of the one that really intrigued me, and Becky and I kind of poured through why this didn't happen in real life, but let's say it did. What if BYU joined Utah into the Pac-12 instead of Colorado? They did the Arizona State thing.
Right.
You get the whole state. What would it look like, et cetera, et cetera? I think that would be quite interesting because Colorado hangs around in the Big 12. And obviously BYU, traditionally, that's the strangest thing. I know there's religious and institutional reasons why they didn't invite BYU. We kind of touched on that.
Yeah,
but BYU has always
played
really West Coast schools in other sports. And I think there's even certain sports because they're in weird regional leagues that BYU is a member at some point. Right. So it always befuddled me why BYU wasn't just included. I think it was for pretty silly reasons. And, sitting where we are now, I think BYU got the last laugh.
Well, I would say this. And that's a great what if, and that's been around for years now. Yep. I think the Pac-12 is still around as an entity if BYU joins.
You think so?
Oh, I'm 100% positive. Because it would have had a different focus nationally.
Yeah.
It would have extended the reach of the Pac-12 to cover the entire country. The reason the Pac-12 failed is because it was a 1 or barely 2 region conference. You need to be a national power if you really want to get some reach. BYU plays games all over the country. So in my opinion, and I think there's some data to back this up, we could bring on Jeff Fuller and Ryan Thomas, and they could work through it because they've they did a bunch of what ifs in the dark days of independence. But I'm pretty positive that it would have been a different conversation that USC might have been having if the conference was a lot stronger than it really was. The Pac-12 was a corrupt organization. You had 12 different goals in mind. USC did not care what anybody else did in football. Washington really was the most balanced of everybody, including USC and UCLA. Washington, I would say, would be the most balanced in all their programs. But Stanford, the most selfish school besides Notre Dame in the country.
Yeah, we touched on that also, that if Stanford wasn't the way that they are, they would be in the Big Ten right now. I have no question about it in my mind. They literally were so arrogant that it cost them a better home than the one they're currently sitting in. I agree with you in a sense, Bomber, that BYU, not that BYU necessarily saves the Pac-12 by itself.
No, I wasn't saying that. No, that's what I said. The Pac-12 would still be together. That's what I said.
The group of people that would agree to add BYU care enough about football to make it a priority. I think adding BYU would have shown a shift in mindset that they never got there on, and it shows.
Right. Well, it's just unfortunate. I have from 19. You guys weren't even born, I don't think. In 1985, I have a SI article. I kept it, and it says BYU to the Pac-12. It's a simple question with a question mark. And this SI reporter said, "Look, this is stupid that the Pac-12 doesn't just get this done." Back in the 80s, the social stuff was not near what it is now. It would have been a lot different conversations you would have had than you have now. Now, I would say we're more enlightened now, right? We're better off now than we were in the 80s. But at the time, that wasn't the barrier. The barrier was just Sunday play and vanity, pride. Those were the two things. Pac-12 didn't think they needed them. The rest of the country thought they should have, though. Dan Beebe was on record saying the Pac-12 died when they didn't add BYU back in 2011. He had no axe to grind, right?
Yeah, it was certainly a stumble and a long list of them. Unfortunately, I got to bring up, seems our Coug friend here, Mimi Robinson, is not impressed with our Husky presenters. What is this Big West Mafia? Love you, but I'm out. We accept all forms of criticism here. We have no problem. If you love the show, hate the show, tell us. We're here to entertain you, and sometimes our takes are garbage. We have no problem with our chat calling them out, but hopefully you'll come around and give us another go. But thank you to our Coug friend Mimi.
I got canceled on Mowing After Dark by the Big 12 fans for a hot minute. For what?
Okay. Let me interrupt you guys really quick. Doug Rohan went to play poker 45 minutes ago. Evidently, he went all out. He's already out. Could we bring him on your show right now?
Let's bring him on.
Let's do it. All right.
Sounding news alert.
Yeah. Hang on. Twitter. Yeah, send out a tweet, would you?
Hey,
just
say
Doug Rohan.
Our friend Mimi Robinson, the Coug fan, will come back around because they don't have to listen to me flap my yap. They can listen to you and Doug talk some real good stuff.
Well, I'm sorry. I hate this. I was trying to do it in 45 minutes.
Well, it's okay. It's all good. Like, she's a Coug fan. She's like, it is what it is. I get it. Like,
right.
But we love. Look, we're on record as saying we only want the best for the Cougars. If we could get them into one of these other conferences, we absolutely would do that.
So Greg Pflugar's joined the show too. So Greg, if you're listening right now, where it's not a long time ago. No, it's right now.
That's right now.
Greg, I've got Doug Rohan joining the show. If you want to come on here, let me share the link with you, and you can join us. Let me send it to you right now. You don't have to. Doug's clicking the link. But if you
we are calling in the heavy hitters today, I tell you,
you guys are have a whole different thing here. Let's see if Greg wants to join. Here's the link, Greg. Love to have you. There's Doug. Would you add him for me, please, Pickles?
Already,
there we go. Okay. All right, here we go.
Doug Rohan, lawyer extraordinaire, joining us. How are you doing, sir?
So, Doug, you lost all your money in like 10 minutes then.
Yeah, it was not a good night. It happens.
Here, I was looking to have the whole thing set up. I was going to send out stuff. That's hilarious to me. All right. How are you doing tonight?
We're doing great. It's been a very fascinating afternoon, as the case. A lot of days with nothing happening, and then all of a sudden everything hits the fan, and we got to jump on and do the car wash.
Yeah, that's good. That's one way to put it. So I heard you on Greg's show earlier tonight, and I sent Greg an invite if he wants to join. He doesn't have to, but give us a quick summation of what even happened today, right? Because when I was listening to Greg's show, you guys were going through documents and those other things, but I came in a little bit late, and I was a little confused actually what we were talking about. So could you catch everybody up as to what really went on today?
I'll let you guys decide how far back you want to go, but for today, what's happening is there is a hearing on Friday in Mecklenburg County, Charlotte, North Carolina, on the motion to dismiss primarily by Florida State, but in response to the issue of jurisdiction and venue.
Right.
Is Florida State subject to the litigation in North Carolina? So today, ACC filed its final response. I hope it's the final response. Today was the deadline for the motions and objections to go back and forth. And today, the ACC was shoring up its arguments as to why Florida State should be subject to the ACC's complaint in North Carolina. And really, today's filing really had 3 points. The first of which was addressing the issue of filing first in North Carolina when they had not taken a vote in the conference to authorize litigation. So
right, we talked about that months ago, right? Okay, all right.
And so the second issue is, okay, even if we didn't previously have authorization, as of January 12th, we have voted to authorize this litigation. And third, Florida State, by filing its documents, subjected itself to the North Carolina jurisdiction. That's a technical issue, and we can get into that depending on how deep in the weeds you want to get. But ultimately, the issue today is, what is material litigation? The bylaws say in the ACC that they need 2/3 of the members to vote to authorize material litigation. And there was no vote before the ACC filed its initial declaratory judgment action. So the ACC is saying 2 things. One, that was not material litigation because we were just trying to preserve the status quo. We wanted the existing relationship, including the grant of rights, to be upheld as valid. But once FSU filed its complaint, and once FSU in Florida, and once FSU filed its answer in North Carolina, then the ACC amended their filings and included some requests for damages to be assessed and for this argument that FSU breached its agreement with the ACC. And so that's what the filing today was about, to lay out the case law and to rebut some of FSU's filings, subjecting itself to litigation in North Carolina.
So, okay, I think I have this all put together. So the March 22nd date, is that still a date certain for some of these rulings?
Well, not for the rulings. This Friday, there will be a hearing. And so let's make sure that we explain what a hearing is.
Right.
The only issue for this hearing is FSU subject to the litigation in North Carolina? And is FSU's motion to dismiss something that the judge wants to grant? So the judge is going to be listening to those 2 issues on March 22nd, Friday. And then I presume sometime next week, the following week, the judge will then issue a ruling on those 2 points. Does Florida State have to answer this complaint? And are they subject to a determination by a North Carolina court that they breached their agreement with the ACC?
Okay. Is this something you were expecting today?
I wouldn't say today's filing was necessarily expected. It was possible, but in the hearing, when we have the hearing, the parties are just going to stand up and give a few key tidbits of what their argument is. The judge is going to be looking at these now 6 different filings for all the case law, and that's where all the legal argument was. And so that's what the judge is going to be basing their decision on, is all of these cases that historically have dictated how North Carolina courts have ruled.
All right, very good. We got a little business to do really quick. Sergeant Pickles, go ahead.
Alrighty, so thank you so much for Bomber and Doug. I know the chat's excited to have your instant reactions and breakdown. You're definitely giving us far better analysis than I could ever muster on short notice, so I appreciate that. But we just wanted to say thank you to all of our channel members. Remind them that any super chats will be read, and we were trying to rip through chat, but this will be, I think, a little bit less chat reading night because of our fantastic guests we're having on. But if you wanted to become a member of the show, here is how you can do that.
Want to become a member of the College Football Mafia family? Simply select the Join button from our homepage. There are several options with their own unique benefits to choose from. You can also set yourself to auto-accept gifted membership by selecting the gift settings options as shown.
And I want to encourage everybody to make sure you're giving super chats to these couple. They're doing great job. Pickles and Becky have put a show together here, and I really want them to know they're appreciated. Also, if you want your comment to be read or addressed by Doug or I right now, it'll have to be a super chat. We're over 600 messages, something like that. It's impossible for us to get to those. So if you want to be involved in that regard, feel free to give us a super chat. Otherwise, we appreciate all the subscribers and members we have, and thanks for being here. All right, so we've got the legal filings now. We know March 22nd is supposed to be this ruling date or another hearing date. What did anything concrete change today? Any paradigms that were altered today?
Well, I think there are important distinctions to address. The first of which is we now know what the ACC's argument is on this idea of the vote. The vote didn't take place until January 12th.
Right.
The litigation was initially commenced on December 21st. So their argument now is we didn't need to take a vote. We, as the board president, in this case, the University of Virginia board president, is making the filings today and filing the subsequent exhibits. The University of Virginia president is saying, we looked at this issue. It was a declaratory judgment action. All we wanted was a North Carolina court to look at the original agreement and say, yes, ACC, you have valid arguments as to why this grant of rights should be enforced. So their argument, ACC's argument is, because that wasn't a material change, then we didn't have to take a vote for material litigation. We wanted to preserve the status quo. Now that we are asking for injunctions, we want FSU to be excluded from votes. We want damages. We want the North Carolina court to say that FSU has caused harm to the ACC. Now that we're alleging those things in the amended complaint, we did have to get a vote, and we got a vote from 10 of our members. It was unanimous, in fact, that the litigation was valid. So A, we didn't need a vote before, but B, even if we needed a vote before, by taking the vote on January 12th, that cured any problems. And they submitted some case law. And unfortunately, I've come across some anecdotal evidence that tends to concern me in FSU's, what I would call now, an uphill battle. There's the Maryland case we have to look at for historical perspective. In 2013, when Maryland left the conference, the same issues came up. And in that litigation in 2013, the North Carolina Court of Appeals said, you are subject to the laws of North Carolina, and the North Carolina courts can issue their rulings against you. Okay. The second thing is that right now, we believe that with a vote of the 10 members, the ACC is saying we have the right. We have established that there are sufficient votes, and that for those two reasons, this is a valid claim in North Carolina. I've also talked briefly to a friend of mine who had a case about 35 years ago, very similar contractual dispute, an allegation that some limited partners were being harmed by the general partners. And he had to take the case all the way to a jury trial, but it was a jury trial in North Carolina where, unfortunately, the North Carolina judges are going to bend over backwards to keep this in North Carolina. And then that makes it for a difficult prospect for FSU to overcome their challenges.
So go ahead.
Go
ahead.
My guess, my question, Doug, is obviously, what does this do then if this is upheld? Because obviously Florida State's filed in the state of Florida.
My guess, my question.
Sorry,
there
you go.
Yeah. Where does that stand if this does have to be kept in the state of North Carolina? Where does that case go? What happens with that?
That's a very, very interesting debate, and we're not 100% clear on that, because after the March 22nd hearing, there's an April 9th hearing in Florida. Then it will rest on the Florida judge's shoulders, who I will say is a double null like me, undergrad and law school. All right. To then either agree with the North Carolina judge that this should be a North Carolina case, in which case he'll issue a stay in Florida saying this litigation is paused while you handle the North Carolina case. Or alternatively, the Florida judge could also say, no, I agree with Florida State's filings. This should be a Florida case, and now we have two competing lawsuits that probably will have to get resolved in federal court.
Let me do an introduction first. We got Rock and Rant, who's a University of Miami alum, or at least he's a fan, and he has some ACC questions that I thought we might be able to answer. Rock, your gain is really high. It's really loud, just so you know. And we're trying to keep short answers. Well, Doug can talk as long as you want, but the rest of us, short answers and short questions. Sergeant Pickles, did you have a question?
Really, my only thing, because I was trying to understand the differences between the two lawsuits and if they could be somehow consolidated or reconciled to where you're only trying. Because is there actually a difference in what each of them is attempting to litigate? Or are they basically two versions of the same thing? I guess that's kind of my confusion with it.
The Florida case will allege certain things that the North Carolina suit is not addressing, one of which being the antitrust issues.
Okay.
The claim is that because this is restraining the trade of Florida State, it is an invalid contract. That's an issue for Florida case and the Florida law. What would happen here is that the North Carolina judge will make his ruling, and then the Florida judge will make his ruling. If the Florida judge puts the case aside, then only one case will move forward in North Carolina. And the courts prefer that. The courts don't want to waste time. They don't want two competing cases. There's a lot of legal ramifications for two competing cases with two different results. So the courts abhor that, the system abhors that, and there will be a determination at some point that only one case proceeds. The question is who's going to make that determination.
Right. My only additional item would be, my only additional item would be if, oh goodness, my mind has gone blank, would be if, do you foresee them avoiding going to discovery because a lot of dirty laundry comes out on both sides, and I've always uneducated, know nothing about law opinion. I think they both want to avoid that at all costs. Do you foresee them trying to weed through this and avoiding going through discovery?
Well, first I would push back on they both want to avoid this. It has been very clear through the filings, Florida State is airing all the dirty laundry. They want everything to come out. And that's to FSU's advantage. Once you peel back the layers of the onion, there are some very questionable decisions that were made by the ACC management. The problem is it beyond the statute of limitations? Is it so far gone that it doesn't matter what Chad Swafford and John Swafford were doing in 2008? Because Florida State at the time they signed the contract already knew all those things. Those items were on the message boards. It's only now that Florida State is raising hell over the issue. And there's some legitimacy to that argument. Look, you let this lapse for so long. Why are you just now bringing it? Well, there's a couple reasons. The first of which is we have more competent leadership now than we had in 2016 and 2013. The second is it was the ACC that unilaterally granted ESPN the 10-year extension to this deal without Florida State's input. So the arguments there are that activity were beyond the scope of the ACC's fiduciary responsibilities, that required a vote of the members. Those are the material issues that will come up once the case moves past this initial phase of motions to dismiss and motions for declaratory judgment. So to answer your question in the long form, Florida State is very interested in discovery. And in fact, this is one example of FSU not playing nice. When the litigation was going forward in North Carolina, both parties got together, filed a joint order saying, we're not going to do discovery in North Carolina. Well, of course, everything in Florida is happening 2 weeks later. So the ACC came to Florida State and said, okay, in Florida, we don't want discovery to move forward either. And FSU said, screw you, we want it all. So that's why last week the ACC had to file its protective order in Florida saying we don't want to answer any of Florida State's discovery while this issue of the motion to dismiss is pending.
Okay, that definitely clears it up. Thank you.
Rock and rant. Let's. You're a Miami fan, just trying to give Doug some perspective here, and you have different type of questions, which is why I wanted to invite you on. Kind of what's your top of mind, and what do you want to know from Doug?
And I apologize if you guys talked about this briefly before I jumped on. I was in the middle of a spreadsheet, hell, as Nathan knows. But the first question I had after hearing, and I heard you earlier today, as well as a couple of other people from the FSU more legal side. First one was just how much of this is a new argument that is useless or baseless from the ACC on the definition of what is in the terms of material? Because to me, when I heard all the conversation earlier and read through the document, I'm trying to figure out how would a 9-year extension of a grant of rights times 2027 times whatever payout ESPN is doing each year be not material in terms of value, whatever the contractual things that were listed in the conversation are. So I'm just curious as to your take specifically on that that argument the ACC is providing in the Mickey Mouse document that we saw today.
So we're conflating two things, and that's fine. This is why I love doing this and why I really enjoy the educational part of it. There's the material media rights, which is what you were just alluding to, but then there's the material litigation. Right now, the only thing we're fighting over is what is the definition of material litigation. We haven't gotten yet to the material media rights, which I would agree. An extension, a unilateral extension by ACC to ESPN is absolutely a material media right that should have required votes. But that's something that will be litigated in the case in chief once we get past these preliminary issues. So the fight today was over the definition of material litigation. And that's what the ACC is trying to thread this needle. They're accusing FSU of changing its arguments. And that's almost fair, but the truth is both sides are changing their arguments. Everybody is changing their arguments once they see what the other side says. And let me back up and remind everybody here, this is outside my area of expertise. I'm a personal injury, workers' compensation, criminal defense lawyer. I'm here to define the terms, to explain the process. I'm not going to opine as to what's going to happen or whether it's a good argument or who's likely to win. That's for the IP lawyers and the copyright lawyers, but it won't matter because it doesn't matter what our opinion is. It matters what the judge says. So I'm just here to cast light, to give light to what is happening, explain what the terms are, and make sure that we are all a educated consumer of this process.
Are you feeling more comfortable today for Florida, being a Florida State alum, member of the marching band? Mm-hmm. And actually, really quick, Doug, why don't you tell everybody what you do? You did a little preview there, but I should have asked you that at the beginning.
Well, that's fair. I really appreciate that. I have my own law firm here in Atlanta, Georgia. Yes, attorneys are licensed by state. So please, if you have any friends or family that get in trouble in Georgia, I'm your guy. But for all the rest of the viewers who are looking at this from across the country, I'm just here to provide some insight and experience from my 20 years of being a litigator to show what the process looks like generally. But if you've had a bad day, we want to be your best friends on your worst day. That's our slogan in Georgia. But I really love Florida State. As Nathan mentioned, I was a marching chief. I'm a booster. I'm a rising spear contributor. I'm a homer for Florida State, as my tagline clearly shows, but I'm also a lawyer that happens to be a Florida State fan. And I want to know what's going on. I want to understand it. And so in the process of digesting it myself, I found myself in a position to explain it to everybody else as well.
So then to follow that up with the question I was starting to ask before is, you're Florida State now. You've seen everything that they've been doing the last 2 years now. You have in mind the strategy that they're going for. If you're sitting in the boardroom tomorrow in Tallahassee and they get the leadership together, the AD's there, SID, have a president of the school, chancellor, whatever. Are you guys feeling better today? Or are you a little bit you're a little bit insecure about what happened today?
Florida State has an uphill battle. There's no question about that. But I go back to what I said at the inception of this litigation. The status quo is the worst case scenario. Being stuck in the ACC until 2036 is the worst case scenario.
I agree.
Being a member of the ACC in 2036 will render Florida State to not be a national power in college football. So why not fight? Why not make the effort? Because the worst that we're going to do is lose the money that we're already losing. Look, we don't have to pay a lump sum of $542 million to the ACC. We just have to stay in the ACC. The worst thing that we might have to do is pay a couple $1 million of attorney's fees to the ACC. So I don't fault FSU for having the fight. I want this to push Florida State and the ACC to a negotiating table. And they did it even in Maryland, where they won the initial issue, where they fought and debated the grant of rights. Maryland had to pay $32 million instead of $51 million. Okay. Well, if we can get a 20% discount on the $574 or $542 million, then great. We're prepared to pay that, but we cannot stay in the ACC. And so at some point, we hope that there is some type of negotiated resolution.
And just following that, and then I'll turn it back over to Pickles. The follow-up question I would have would be, when we're going through and we're looking at everything for the most likely outcomes, and we talked before, I said it was going to be 120 to 80 million, and everybody's doing all these estimates and whatnot. And I don't think money is the final determiner. I think it's access. I think you guys want to be part of a relevant P2 conference. P2 is now codified. So it knowing that that's the uphill battle and knowing that you're in it to the end, do you see any reason, especially if you don't think you're going to get more than a 20% discount, why not take the thing all the way to the end? Why not settle? Why not do the Kirk Schultz, go down with the ship, right? Because Kirk Schultz and Washington State and Oregon State were punished for his vote and his intransigence. They got $360,000 a year. The Mountain West makes 1.9 per school. So it's ridiculous. So there is a punishment part of this, but that's not the same thing. We're dealing with something else, and this is just a legal dispute. So why not Florida just pull the pin and go to the very end?
That is possible, and that is a realistic possibility in this situation. That's where it goes back to Sergeant Pickles' point about the discovery. How much does the ACC want to be embarrassed by an unwilling partner that wants out of this relationship? The exit fee is $120 million. We're not getting out for nothing. So $120 million is the floor, as I understand it. Question is, how much more than the $120 million does Florida State have to pay? The math works. Anything below $300 million is a net positive for Florida State. You add to that the recent negotiations for the conference payouts for the playoffs, and that adds another 10 to 15 million per partner in terms of what the payout is. So if we're talking about a $50 million disparity with Purdue and with Vanderbilt, then you add to that another 10 million on top of that. Well, 10 years at $60 million in disparity, $600 million. So they can come to some negotiation as to when the payout is due. It's not going to be a lump sum. Okay, so we get 350 million, but it's due over 10 years. Fine. I think Florida State signs on to that tomorrow. The question is, where will those negotiations land? How strong is the argument? That process starts on Friday.
Okay. Pickles, I'm going to turn it over to you for a bit, and then I'm going to rejoin, so you guys can leave if you want to, and we can keep it going as long as Doug wants to be here. All right, I'll be right back.
All righty. Yeah, part of my mind, I get this isn't explicitly stated in the lawsuit, but how much do you think this is factored in by the pending ESPN decision point of whether to extend the TV contract or not? Because it almost seems like I don't see any reason why they would extend that contract unless they know that Florida State is staying. So obviously it makes sense for them to be silent at this point, but do you see this litigation possibly pushing to that deadline, which could really throw a wrench in the works, and how you think that affects the lawsuit itself?
Of all the details that have come out through this litigation, that has been the most shocking development, because nobody, including, to my knowledge, Florida State, even knew about this unilateral 10-year option that ESPN had. We thought that we were dealing with damages all the way through 2036. Now we know we're not. The agreement's only till 2027. That's what the ACC was pissed off about in the revealing of certain documents and certain details. So you're right. I think ESPN ultimately is the one that holds all the cards, and they could very easily be the champion for the sport to come through and resurrect the ACC, undo the damage done by the playoff committee in this last event, and they could reestablish the ACC as a primary power simply by renegotiating the deal. The problem is, what impetus does ESPN have to do that? They've got a bargain basement deal with a standard, get this, a standard 4.5% escalation each year. Why would ESPN want to alter the deal? Even without Florida State, as long as Clemson and the other parties stay, that's a great product for ESPN to have in their repository. So they would agree to the unilateral extension. The problem is what happens when Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and any of the other more profitable members leave. Then does ESPN come through? The problem is we know ESPN is hemorrhaging money. We know they're laying off people in Bristol. We know that they're struggling with profitability. ABC and ESPN wants to shed ESPN from their, or ABC and Disney want to shed ESPN from their portfolio. So they are going to be the ones that are holding all the keys to this negotiation. And yeah, if they wanted to preserve the status quo, they'd come through and renegotiate the deal. I just don't think anybody at ESPN is that altruistic. And so they're going to be the ones forcing the ACC to not let this go 2 years. They want this to be resolved before February of 2025. That's when they exercise their option.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And kind of tying back around to the previous explanation you gave me, how much do you think ACC's negotiation and of their ACC of wanting to avoid discovery is about not setting a monetary precedent for other teams leaving? Because they if they assume Florida State's out, they'll fight it tooth and nail to the very end. How do they kind of thread the needle of allowing Florida State to leave for a sum, not letting discovery totally ruin their reputation as a conference, but also not setting a price tag that's attainable so that other teams are just flying out the door?
So there was a quirk in the litigation that I think briefly gave the ACC an out if they wanted it. There was some discussion in one of the filings that the Board of Trustees is the only entity that can agree to contracts and contract extensions.
Right.
Well, the president signed this contract with the grant of rights. And so the ACC, I think if they had been shrewd, if they had enough foresight, they could have said, you know what, you're right, FSU, you don't want to be here. We don't want you here. Let's go ahead and settle for $100 million now. But the reason why you're being let out is because you didn't legally have the authority to sign onto the grant of rights. Meanwhile, every other school is obligated to remain as part of the ACC and the grant of rights. Now, that's a tricky legal argument. There's some agency issues related to that. If you don't object to the president signing within a couple years, then you're acquiescing to the president being part of this deal. Another problem with the delay. But if the ACC had wanted to thread a needle, that was one of those opportunities. So now the only alternative is to just make the price tag as high as possible and hope the other schools can't afford it. FSU has been gearing up for this fight for over a year. FSU has been talking to private equity partners. We've been squirreling cash away. As I understand it, I think I read on Twitter that the ACC hasn't even made their payouts for the 2023 season to FSU. That's fine. Keep that. That's part of the damages of what we're going to discuss anyway in our agreement. They just need the price tag to be closer to $300 million so that it doesn't open the barn doors to 3 or 4 other schools leaving, because there's not 3 or 4 other schools that have $300 million stashed for this type of endeavor.
Yeah, definitely. That was my very initial thought is how do you let one horse out of the stable without opening it and there's a flood and they all leave? But thank you for clarifying that. That 120 to 300 window that you're talking about working in, that definitely makes a lot of sense.
All right. Let's see. Let's have Rock and Rant go. He's put his hand up. That was very nice of you, Rock. Go ahead.
So, Doug, a question sort of to follow up on sort of the conversation we're just having right now in terms of there's a lot of conversations about the fact that Jim Phillips didn't present a vote to the members about the extension, and that they're in the wrong from that perspective. But from an ESPN perspective, how much does apparent authority or ostensible authority play into the fact that they have a reasonable expectation that Jim Phillips was in a position to extend this deal? And is there a scenario where both ESPN and FSU are both in the right against the ACC? And how could that play out? Like, is that actually a thing that ESPN should have the reasonable expectation that Jim Phillips had the ability and was empowered to do this, even if in fact he wasn't?
So as we've seen in Twitter, there are some people out there that hate FSU and think that we're being childish in this process. And yeah, they are seeking it's funny, everybody's learning so much in this process. They want to become experts in it, including myself. Again, this is not my area. I'm learning about this as the issues come up. So that's where this issue of agency came up with Florida State and the ACC. Well, the same applies in this situation. The same applies. Did we lose everybody?
Nope.
Okay,
that was me accidentally.
So the agency issues would also apply, just like you said, to ESPN and the ACC. The problem is that as far as Florida law goes, there's two aspects to the agency issue. The first is that apparent authority to act. And yes, that is ESPN's mistake in presuming that Jim Phillips had the authority. But the second, in order to enforce that agency provision, you have to show substantial harm to the party that's not at fault. So the question is, in that extension, that unilateral extension, is there some harm to ESPN in not respecting that agency authority? And the question is, does ESPN have clean hands in this issue? That's where the discovery is going to come up, and that's where the conversations about John Swofford and the Tier 1 rights and the Tier 2 rights is relevant and is valid. If ESPN didn't have any doesn't have any damages from the agreement not being upheld, then you don't get to impute that agency into the contract signing.
You have a follow-up?
Another thing that's
yeah,
I was sort of coming up on that as well. Maybe it's just sideways related. Is there anything that you've seen in terms of the bylaws or expectations, whether it's going to come out in discovery or not, where various votes that have happened, whether it's the members who voted to approve the amended complaint, which, I don't know how much validity that really matters in the sense of the baby was already born, so I don't really know, other than like a show vote that could have been. But will those votes come out? Like, is there anything in the ACC bylaws that you've seen as you've dived more into it, you've heard from fellows, that any 2/3, 3/4, full votes, present members will actually come out in discovery, so we can answer those rumors of everything we all are sort of curious about, even if it doesn't necessarily change the outcome?
Yes, that information won't be something that's private.
Did we lose him? Or is that me?
His screen went black.
Okay, all right.
Oh,
there he is. He's back.
The ACC sucked Doug into the legal void.
ACC put a cease and desist.
Disney bought Google while we were sitting here. So
yep.
I'm gonna answer this question, then answer a text message from my daughter. I thought I could do both at the same time.
Okay. Well, go ahead. Do what you need to do.
The information will come out. This isn't going to be a secret vote. This isn't something that's going to be held in confidence. In fact, I reread the documents 2 or 3 times, thinking that maybe it would already be discernible from the documentation. What is interesting is that today's filing included the UVA president. We thought UVA was one of the teams that would be interested in the Big Ten. So that is a curiosity. But it is one of those things that are just for shits and giggles. I hope this isn't a family show. Who are the 10 teams? Because only 10 teams were invited to vote, and all 10 teams voted unanimously. So that means 4 teams, not including FSU, the 5th team, 4 teams were not asked to vote. 4 teams did not participate in the vote. They obviously are the ones that are probably on the outside looking in.
Is this
like, do you think that was they were not asked to vote, or they just were not available on the heightened short, not notice of 72-hour notice they normally would need? Can you discern from that it's the difference between we weren't available to attend this meeting on such short notice, so therefore we weren't present to vote, versus not asked to vote, because those are two fundamentally different things.
Yeah. So there is a technical distinction there based on the emails that were sent out in the exhibits today. All members other than Florida State were invited on 48 hours notice to the vote. January 10th, they sent out the email for a vote on January 12th. Why they didn't do it on January 13th, I don't know. Because if you just wait one more day, then you don't need 3/4 of the members to assent to the meeting on short time. So again, the ACC in any number of ways is shooting itself in the foot, but they did invite all but Florida State to vote, or at least to waive the 72-hour notice requirement. And then by report of the affidavit filed by the ACC, 10 members voted and 10 members voted to authorize the litigation. So I don't know the answer to that question specifically, but I do think, again, that is information that will be forthcoming at some point.
Becky, you had a question.
Yeah, I guess my question is, at what point does, like, Notre Dame has a vote? So,
which is crazy.
Which is weird.
It's just so crazy.
And especially when it comes to football. I mean, at what point do you foresee, like, in this discovery, because obviously we saw, I think you posted earlier about the University of Virginia president, like, being specifically named. Do you think we'll see who these 10 schools are at any point here who voted yes?
It won't be before Friday, but yes, I do think that at some point, and look, there's going to be depositions. That's another reason why nobody wants discovery. The judge is going to be framing the issues and what's valid, what's not valid. That's going to be part of the discussion by both courts, is where do you draw the line? Because they're not going to just allow the depositions of everybody going back to 2008. But somebody's getting deposed, somebody's going to be questioned, somebody's going to be challenged. And people don't like being deposed. It's not a fun process. And that, I think, is one of the things that's going to drive a discount. Question is, how big is that discount off full freight?
And then my other question is, do you foresee obviously not every school kind of knows where they're going to fall here. Do you foresee any, like specifically the 3 new schools, do you see anybody essentially like jumping in with their lawyers trying to help fight this with the ACC? Or is that something that they can even do? Like, because we saw it out here in the Pac-12. We saw the other 10 schools essentially, well, 9 of the 10 got their lawyers involved essentially with the conference. Is that something that you foresee with the ACC and their battle here?
One way that could happen in litigation, there's something called an amicus brief. Once the litigation is done, anybody that wants to write a brief to the judge can file what's called an amicus brief, a friend of the court. And what they're saying is that they're not a party to the suit, but they have an interest in the suit. Okay. And so they can put forth their own arguments. They can put forth their own twists and turn on the logic. So any number of people can file those additional briefs. I don't know that they're necessarily get involved to the point of filing an entry of appearance and appearing on behalf of one of the other affected parties. In particular, the 3 new schools, they need to keep their mouth shut and just sit on the back and watch this, because at the end of the day, that is one of the things that FSU is pushing on and pointing to as how the ACC has neglected their duties. The ACC's job is to fight for the preeminence of the ACC as a conference and the College Football Selection Committee. That wasn't the reason for the litigation, but it was the last straw that broke the camel's back. That was when they said, FSU, you're not a member of the top conferences. And if you're not a member of the top conference, you don't get to be in the playoffs. So in that discussion of adding SMU and Cal and Stanford, what they're saying there is you went and got the 3 most garbage available, no value members just because you were worried that FSU and the Magnificent 7 would vote to dissolve the conference. So you wanted to get 3 more members to put the math back in your favor to make sure that we didn't just unilaterally or with a group of 7 dissolve the ACC outright. So no, I don't think that those 3 members add much value to the discussion. I don't think they add much value in terms of the TV rights. And if anything, the more of a vocal position they take in the process undercuts the ACC and their arguments that they are a preeminent conference.
So you've been kind to give us 45 minutes, Doug. We really appreciate it, especially short notice. I'm sorry you lost some money tonight. We'll have to get together and play some Hold'em. That's my favorite thing to do. That's not
Absolutely.
this. So at the end of it, maybe trip to Vegas is only 5 hours for me. I'd fly down there. Anyway, we could talk about that later. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for being here. Sorry to interrupt Becky and Pickles, interrupt your channel. We had him for a little bit of time, and I was hoping that would be okay. I appreciate Rock and Rant being here. I've only got one more question, and then I'll turn it back over to Pickles. My last question is, you're a Florida State guy. Where do you think you guys are playing football next fall, 2025, and at what cost?
We are staying in the ACC for 2025.
Okay.
We will be a member of the Big Ten for 2026.
Okay.
And we will end up paying $187 million for that privilege.
I love it. That's great. All right, Pickles, that was my last question.
Yeah, I'll pitch it out to Rock and Rant or Becky if you have anything else. Doug, if you have any fun comments you want to throw out, but Rock and Rant, you get first crack.
Just one quick last one, Doug, in terms of any take on the ACC is essentially treating FSU as if they've given notice, right, by excluding them from this versus FSU's, if I read everything correctly and learned from people like you, saying to the judge that if they are given, if they win the case, to make their notice be retroactive. They're slightly different. And does the ACC have a legal standing right now to say that FSU has really given them the notice that then let them be excluded from communications on this last round of fun?
Yeah, this is a fun point because, again, it doesn't really play into the litigation itself, but both parties are arguing the exact opposite in the other filings and the other litigation. FSU is telling the North Carolina judge, look, we weren't putting in our notice that we were leaving the ACC. We just filed a declaratory judgment asking in Florida if this grant of rights was valid. We weren't saying that we would leave the conference. Well, we all know that FSU wants to leave the conference. By contrast, the ACC is trying to say in Florida, this wasn't a preemptive rush to the courthouse because we had a draft of the complaint before there was a vote of the Board of Trustees. And so it was an absolute determination that they were already leaving. Conversely, at the same time, Florida State added in the last paragraph of every one of their complaint paragraphs, if the judge agrees with this in Florida, we want out. We want you to relate back our notice to leave to August of 2023. And then in North Carolina, they're arguing, well, we haven't actually put to a vote whether or not we're leaving. We haven't claimed we're leaving. So it's funny how the crisscross works in both litigations. Both parties are arguing nothing has happened, and both parties have said the determination has already been made, and it's comical more than anything else. But to your point, yes, in that vote to authorize the litigation, the North Carolina filings ask for injunctive relief, where they're asking the judge to agree that Florida State is a member in bad standing and not member non grata and shouldn't be allowed to vote. I personally think that in that litigation vote, they probably already voted to suspend Florida State as well. So whether the judge grants the injunction or not, I think that the votes already exist on record privately that Florida State is no longer a voting member of the ACC.
All righty, Becky, if you have anything left for Doug or otherwise.
No, I'm good. I'm good. That's a lot of information to take in. Thank you, Doug.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks for reaching out,
Doug. If you have your last final thought, as long as it doesn't violate YouTube terms of service, you can talk crap about anyone you want to. Have a shot at our friend Rocket down here. Anything goes on Big West Mafia.
On our show, we allow the trash talk.
Yes.
We give everybody, and we'll do it here at the end. We give everybody last couple of minutes of the show. We're like, hey, if you pay, we'll say it.
Yeah.
So whatever you want to say.
If you send us super chats, we'll read them as long as it doesn't violate terms of service.
Yes.
I'm a non-traditional Florida State fan. We do have our rivals with Miami and Florida, but I grew up riding my bike to Mark Light Stadium. I was
Oh,
there
wow.
for all 5 championship rings. So I still feel that in my heart when the Miami fans talk about we have 5 rings, you have 3. We've still got some catching up to do, legitimately. But at the same time, I am happy to point out that that trophy case is empty and has been empty since Miami joined the ACC, and they haven't even scored a touchdown yet in a championship
Oh
game,
boy.
which
Hold on, wait,
our third
breaking
string
news.
quarterback
Georgia
did.
just scored again, I think. If I'm not
Oh,
mistaken.
wow.
Did they just score? Was it? Okay, just want to make
Didn't
sure.
he? I thought he took a knee. Isn't that? Did he take a
Yeah.
knee?
Well, we can fix bad coaching, but I won't even take a big shot because I respect what you guys are doing, and Florida sucks more, so it's okay.
I'm cheering for Miami and Gainesville.
Yeah. Bringing
There we
people
go.
together for their mutual hate of Florida. It's what you love to
Whatever
see.
you got to do to solve world peace,
Amen and amen.
There's
Good
super
night,
chat
guys.
down there. Hey,
Oh,
good night, Doug.
yeah,
We'll see you later.
I'll hang on for a super chat.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, our good friend Tony Lasher. Tony, come on, membership. You're in here all the time giving super chats, man. I want you to have access to those awesome Wild Ute videos. Wisconsin stinks, that is all. Thank you for that, Tony.
Go Badges. Go Badges.
If our good friend Ryan Willie was in here, him and Tony would be at it until the sun burns out and the universe dies.
Real quick, Doug. Don't know if you knew this, but Wisconsin doesn't sell alcohol throughout the whole stadium. They only sell it to the rich people
premium section only.
in the premium section.
As a member of the premium seating and the season ticket options at Florida State, I ascribe to that theory. I'm glad they've eventually come around, but that was the reason why I got Champions Club seats for the bourbon.
I did the same thing at Washington when we started selling alcohol.
I sit in the cheap seats, so I like my beverages.
Good deal. All right, guys. Have a good night.
All right, we'll see you later. You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Doug.
Yeah.
All righty. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Yeah. Saved rounds, anything you can think of off the top of your head. We got no problem with people invading our show to give us some very hard-hitting analysis there.
Yeah, Doug did a great job on that.
Yeah,
that's a lot. That's a lot of info the last couple of weeks. So
I think the most important thing is that we stay on top of that stuff when it happens, right? We do the best we can to pass the information on. Greg Flugar, peek around the corner, broke that this afternoon.
Yep.
And make sure he gets all the credit in the world. And thanks for letting me invade your show, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And this stuff is changing all the time, day by day, and we're doing our absolute best at the College Football Mafia Network to bring it to you. And we're happy to step aside and give you some analysis, because who knows, by tomorrow we get another drop and the news changes completely. That's happened to us multiple times. So we appreciate Doug, Bomber, and Rock and Rant being here. But thank you for joining Big West Mafia and for College Football Mafia show, as this turned into. Can join us again, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific on Mondays, and our other fantastic shows are found links down here at the bottom for our other creators. Thank you to all our members in chat, and Tony, our friend, gifting us the super chat there. And from all of us here at the College Football Mafia and Big West Mafia, take it easy, and we will see you next week.
See you tomorrow night. Bye-bye.